Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. I just hit rank 25 on the global leaderboards for the endgame of Suicide Squad, and I've been playing it a bunch, so I think that makes me qualified to give you a list of tips and tricks I wish I knew sooner before I started playing, such as secret aspects of different characters' traversals, ways to get XP much faster, missions that I'd recommend doing in a certain order, and a whole bunch of other useful stuff. So if that sounds good to you, then drop a like on the video and we'll get started. First of all, really near the start of the game's going to give you the option to choose a character, and you don't need to spend any time stressing about which one you pick here, because very, very soon after, the game is going to give you the option to switch characters at any time, and there's nothing that persists from that choice at the beginning to mean that you can't play the other characters or they're less good for you in some way. So genuinely, at that point, I would just pick whoever you think looks coolest. Now, when you're a little bit past that sort of tutorial sequence and you're playing the game, you're rotating through different characters to figure out which one you want to main, you're probably gonna pay a lot of consideration to their movement style and the way their kit works. Now, this is good. You are going to want to do that because the movement options that each character has massively impact the type of playstyle that they suit best. But I want to give you a word of warning not to judge a character too quickly when you start out, because as you work through their skill tree, you're going to actually find that there are various abilities which change their playstyle quite a lot. For example, I thought I wanted to main Deadshot, but I wasn't fully sure because it felt like his jetpack ran out of fuel really quickly. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just play King Shark because then I can jump into the air a lot, but then I can slam down as well, and I don't need to worry about constantly hovering. However, at level 6, Deadshot gets the option to unlock active heat sinks, which decreases your jetpack heat buildup rate by 50%. This revolutionized the character for me, and now I fly around and I basically never ever have to land. I'm just constantly hovering in fights, and it's so satisfying. So don't write off a character too early before you've explored their skill tree a little bit to see if their kit in the future might actually really suit your playstyle. Also, the respec on this screen is free. You can do it at any time. So if you find a weapon combo in the game that you're really enjoying and it kind of changes your playstyle to suit the weapon, it's always a really good idea to go back into the talent screen and slightly adjust the talents that you've chosen to fit that weapon playstyle even better. Now, as you play in combat, you might find that sometimes it's a bit annoying having to do the shield harvest because you'll be kind of in your flow with your weapons and then you're like, oh, okay, now I have to shoot the leg, god damn it, and then I have to melee, and it just takes a little while to do. But if you want to deal massive damage while also getting yourself a bunch of shields, you can use your Suicide Strike, which you unlock at level 5 on each character. And when I first started playing, I just thought that this was like a fancy show-off move, but it will actually get you shields back as well, which is really handy. Now, as you work through that skill tree, you're going to start unlocking parts of your kit which only activate once you're above a certain level of combo. Now, as you'd expect, you gain more combo from chaining together traversal moves and also getting a bunch of enemy kills. But that combo can be broken in various ways. If you take damage during combat, for example, it decreases your combat combo. Also, you missing your shots makes you more likely to start losing that combo. And also, if you're out of action, you're just not killing stuff for too long, that combo is also just going to go away and reset back to 0. So when you're trying to use those higher tiered combo abilities, you're going to want to try and smartly play to maintain the combo rather than just wiping everything in the area straight away, for example, and then being like, okay, I've got nothing to kill now, so my combo's going to go away. But if that does happen, fear not, there's actually a way during missions to get max combo, which is typically 50, but it can actually be higher, instantly. You can just get to 50 combo straight away, and it's by doing the combat flare challenges. At first, I was just giving up on those because I was like, I don't want to have to get like slide kills, boring. But it genuinely is worth it because it's going to make you so much stronger being at 50 combo once you start getting talents that apply to that in the skill tree. Now, speaking of the slide, on different characters, this is going to have different effects. But for example, on Harley Quinn, when you're using your little grapple and it goes on cooldown, if you slide, it's going to instantly reset that cooldown so you can go straight into another grapple. Or alternatively, on Deadshot, you'll be using your jetpack. If you afterburn, so that means you reset your jetpack, you're then going to have to land once your pack runs out of fuel. But if you land into a slide, you're going to keep all of your momentum and you'll be able to take off again with a reset jetpack, and you'll have a new afterburn ready to use. And on top of all of those things, for all characters, by jumping into a slide in this way, it's actually going to extend your traversal traversal meter. So that meter is basically like the amount of jetpack that you've got remaining, right? But by doing a slide and then jumping out of it back into traversal, you get this little extra boost to it, which can be really useful if you've got a long jetpack ride in your future, for example. Now let's talk about combat and XP a little bit and things like that. So towards the beginning of the game, it's really worthwhile spending just an extra couple of minutes taking down a bunch of the sentry turrets and tanks on the roofs of Metropolis. They are going to give you a significant amount of XP compared to your character level, and that's going to mean that you're going to level a fair bit faster just from doing those. You don't want to be too stressed about grinding this the entire time though, although later in the game you can take out those battlements in about a second, so it's really not that stressful to do. Anyway, the next thing I'd say for making sure you level up as fast as possible is to pay attention to which character is psyched up for a given mission. If you hover over the mission that you're thinking about doing on the map, or you just run over to it in person, you can often see this little icon that will appear telling you which character is psyched up. And I think that as much as it says it reduces your bruises and boosts your damage, that's not really the main benefit for this. The main benefit is that if you play as a psyched up character, you'll get double the XP at the end of the mission. But there are actually a handful of other ways to also increase the amount of XP that you get there without entirely relying on being psyched up. So for example, if you manage to do the entire mission without dying, you'll get an extra 10 to 15% XP. And similarly, and this actually goes for everything in the game, not just for missions, if you go to the main menu of the game and you change your difficulty to sweating bullets, you're going to get 30% extra resources and 20% extra XP from everything you do. I personally find the game quite easy, and especially if you've taken any time to level up a little bit further, taking down those rooftop battlements, for example, then I think that you should be pretty much fine, even though the game is harder on that harder difficulty, obviously. Now, another way to get even more XP is to really pay attention when you're getting new weapons and look out for weapons which give you extra XP from kills. You can typically get up to about 15% extra kill XP, and it works on a per weapon basis, so you need to use the weapon with that stat in order to get the bonus. But separate to that, on your mods, you can get stats which are just flat plus 15% XP gain, and so that means it's from everything. So these are really massively valuable to look out for. And once you get to the end game of the game, you're going to unlock a new squad skills talent tree, which are basically talents that apply to absolutely all of your characters at once. And the very first thing that I would recommend dumping your new skill points into there is the stat that also gets you plus 0.5% XP per skill point you spend on it. That skill tree at the end of the game can also be respec'd at any time, so you don't need to stress too much, but I really think that building up extra XP gain on it is a good move. Now, we'll come back to combat and XP and looting and all sorts of stuff like that in a moment, but first, I really quickly want to talk about the visuals of the game. A lot of people, when they first start playing, think that the game looks way too visually cluttered, and that kind of puts them off. But I'd really massively recommend you go into your options menu, scroll over to the interface tab, and just start turning things off. Like, especially once you're comfortable with the game, dynamic tutorials, for example, off. Combat flare challenges, once you start getting comfy, again, you're gonna be at max combo anyway, so you don't need to see what those challenges are. Turn them off. And while you're in the menus, go over to the gameplay tab, scroll down to the camera section, and I would personally recommend upping your camera distance all the way to the max. And if you then scroll over to the video tab, you can increase your field of view as well. And while you're there, turn off camera shake. This is going to mean that you have a lot more vision of the overall battlefield while you play, and you never really need to see your character up close and personal, so you don't lose anything from zooming out in this way. You just gain a better understanding of what's going on around you, so it's really worth doing. Now, a couple rapid fire tips here. You don't need to manually grab resources from tanks and stuff that you take out. Like, when you destroy it, you're going to see a bunch of loot on the floor. You can just run away and the game will still give you that loot. And I'm pretty sure this also applies to weapons as well. Also, if the traversal and stuff's just taking you too long and you're like, oh my god, I wish I had a fast travel, you will actually get a fast travel. It's still fairly limited. It's only going to take you to 1 or 2 locations. But for example, once you talk to Hero, I won't say anything more just because I don't want to spoil things, items, you're then going to be able to fast travel to the Hall of Justice in the bottom right-hand corner of the map at any time. Now, another thing that's going to be revealed as you play the game is the contracts screen, and you're going to start off with just 2 contracts available there, but by doing side quests in the game, you can actually get more contract slots, and I have a tip for you to get legendary weapons from contracts. So it's tempting to say, okay, at any time, I'll take the contracts that give the best rewards, and those typically also take the longest to complete. I think the better way round is to do all the contracts that are as easy as possible so that you can complete them as fast as possible, and that way you can reset the list of available contracts much more quickly, and you're more likely then, as you continue to roll the dice there, to have a legendary contract pop up, which will give you legendary rewards such as a legendary weapon. Now, despite the fact that I've mentioned character side quests and stuff here, I think that it's actually a good idea to generally avoid those character side quests until you get towards the end of the game. And this might sound counterintuitive, but it's simply because once you reach endgame, the list of activities that you're going to complete are going to narrow down a lot. Like, once you no longer have that main quest guiding you through the world, you're going to be trying to grind those endgame activities, right? But in order to keep things fresh, you might not want to do those endgame activities all the time. And so that's where doing the side quests can actually be a really nice change of pace. And also, it's pretty likely that you're going to end up having friends at some point that want to do those side quests because they have different progress to you. And so you might as well do those quests with buddies as opposed to just grinding them out in your basement, 4 a.m., Mountain Dew in hand. Like, take it easy. There's really no rush on them, in my opinion. Apart from, and I told you I was going to give you recommendations on mission order here, so I wouldn't stress about those side quests apart from the first Penguin mission, which unlocks Overhaul for you, and the first Lex mission focused on nanomachines. Overhaul is really useful as you play through the game because if you're using a certain weapon that you really like, but it's just starting to feel a little bit outdated, you can overhaul it to bring it up to speed and make it more powerful. And the nanomachines are really good to have active because you're going to earn those nanomachine points as you play with a given weapon that has nanomachines available. So you might as well get started on earning those nano points early so you can spend them and make those weapons really OP. And they really do make a good difference. So it's worth paying some attention to those nanobots. Now, a tip about overhaul that I just mentioned is that you can do it from the loadout. You just press triangle on the weapon that needs to be overhauled, and then it will give you the overhaul option in the menu. But when you press on overhaul there, you'll notice that at the bottom, it says it includes a 75% field tax. And I didn't know what the hell that even meant originally, but I did a bit of snooping around online, and I discovered that if you go back to the Hall of Justice and you find Penguin there, interacting with him in person will allow you to overhaul, and it will be more cheap. So if you're really tight on resources, this could be a good way to do a bunch of overhauls fast without having to pay the price. Now, seeing as we're talking about like the menu and different stuff that you can do in the loadout and things like that, I think it would be good to talk about breaking stuff down. So you're going to obviously end up with your favorite firearms, your favorite melee, stuff like that. And that's going to mean that you end up finding a lot of loot that you don't need. Now, there are 2 recommendations I have here for those extra weapons that you're going to be getting. First of all, don't think that they're useless just because you can't equip them on your main, because you can go over to the other characters in your squad, equip those spare weapons that you don't have space for on main, and you can build and synergize your squad's talents together here in a really tactical way. So for example, I main Deadshot, but on my Harley, I've given her Black Mask's Bulletstorm, the notorious pistol, which deals Black Mask's mark to enemies when you shoot them, and when she shoots 3 enemies, it triggers a fiery explosion that burns enemies. This is really useful for me because I have other stuff in my loadout that synergizes with doing more damage to burned enemies. And now I get that benefit passively just from Harley being present and being a bot doing what bots do best, which is shooting stuff with an aimbot. So don't just trash weapons that you can't equip on main, but instead put them to use. Now, if you don't want to put them to use or they're just really trash, you can press square when you're hovering over stuff to manage that gear, and then you can mark a bunch of stuff for breakdown all at once so you don't have to do it one by one. But as you get through the game, manually marking everything that you get for breakdown is just a bit tedious. And so instead, I would recommend favoriting the stuff that you like using, and anything that you want to keep needs to get favorited. And then you can simply break down the slot, and that will get rid of absolutely everything that isn't favorited there, and and it will also avoid stuff that's in a saved loadout. Another tip that's really good to just build the muscle memory for and build the habit for is spamming down on your D-pad to do that little kind of ping that you can do to mark enemies, because there's really no reason not to have that scan up at all times, and it makes it a lot easier to chain combo together and stuff like that when you know exactly where the enemies are. Now, returning to weapon combos real quick, later in the game, you're gonna get access to notorious weapons and infamous weapons, and just various weapons that have set bonuses, and they have affiliations with certain villains such as Black Mask or Bane or Doctor Strange or a whole bunch of different people. But one of the coolest things that you can do with those once you get there is to actually combine different items from different villains to get villain synergies. So this is, instead of a set bonus, you'll get a bonus like the Terror Behind the Mask, for example, which is a Bane and Black Mask combo. Some of these get insanely powerful too, so if you're interested in learning about the best weapon combos and synergies for endgame, or if you're still working towards endgame and you want even more XP tips for leveling faster and stuff like that, I've got other videos linked on screen right now that you can click, which will have all the answers you are looking for. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If it's been useful, please drop a like on it, and I'll see you in those other videos.